What I don't know is whether we work towards consensus and eliminate things which aren't producing the consensus. I don't see any point in us trying to do something which is different. I suppose if we did, suddenly wanted to be a sculptor, I mean...
I'm finding some help.
You probably want some help. Say that. Yeah. It's worked, and I've no idea why. It obviously can't. Like people getting married at 20,
That shouldn't have worked either, should it? I was born in 1944 in Welwyn City. My parents are Irish, born in Ireland. My father worked for a firm called Murphy Radio, who built radios, and that was always his big interest. And they but he designed the cabinets for them.
And he always supported his daughters being educated and going to art school, which I think he wanted to go to art school when he was young. I was born 24th of June in 1945. My parents were moved out of London during the war to St Albans. When I was 7, we got a council house on the edge of St Albans. At the end of the road, it was woodland. So I spent a lot of my childhood running around the woods. I was school phobic. So I don't know quite. We have friends who say, I don't quite understand how you got where you are without reading. So I find it very hard to read. Despite this, I got into grammar school, I think because I didn't find IQ tests difficult. I just didn't understand grammar school. I don't think they understood me. It was a complete mismatch. So I hated it and spent all my time trying to get out of being there, in the woods. So instead of going to school, I'd go and spend the day in the woods and making all kinds of excuses and stuff. But eventually sort of squeezed enough qualifications to get to art school after 1 year in the 6th. And just by that time at school, I just liked art. I liked doing it. It was not a vocation even. I just liked it. Initially, those days, you would go to your local art school where there was this course called a pre-diploma 1 year, which you'd go and find out what you wanted to do before you...
So whether you wanted to be a sculptor or a whatever.
Fionnuala, I mean, we forgot about this, about Nuala's education. She also went to grammar school and fell out with her idiot head teacher by coming home late from Ireland because the snow wouldn't let her get to the ferry.
And I should have lied and just said, I'm sorry, I had a cold, I forgot to bring a note. So I said, oh, I couldn't get to the boat to get back in time because of the snow, and they had to look after it. They're farmers and get their stock. He said, that's disgusting behaviour, putting school second. And all that. He said, I'll never write you a good reference. And this was, I was 17 at the time. And he didn't. And I'd wanted to go and study anthropology in Edinburgh. And then he sent his reference, and it got reduced to a general course then. So I thought, I don't know if I want to do this. So while I was thinking about it, deciding what I wanted to do, art had been my... not refuge, I think. It was an odd one because it's art teachers are always disapproved of in grammar schools. They were looked down on the rest of the staff. But there was a wonderful headmaster who came before this jerk, who had come from industry. He decided that students he was getting needed something else, and he would, come in and be interesting, exciting. And he started, chats for sixth formers at his house, and I think we might have had wine. I mean, I don't know, but he would talk to me. And hang my paintings in his office, which was wonderful because he'd say, and have you ever seen this one? What about this one? And bring out books. And have you, when you last went to the Tate? And it was him really who made it seem possible. So I went to the same art school, and so Les and I met in the Life Drawing Room and had a whale of a year. We worked really hard. We had, sort of 9 till 9, some way.
Mostly drawing, was it?
Mostly drawing, a lot of it.
In fact, we met with a 60-year-old sailor.
Subturating model in the
naked 60-year-old sailor in between us. And there was a policy in the school not to have young models because there had been some fraternisation.
Quentin Crisp used to model there. But anyway, it was, and it was extraordinary in lots of ways. I did get told by that same one of those drawing tutors, I had to choose whether to be a woman or an artist. And it was absolutely basic to, him. He thought it couldn't be both. Anyway, I've been trying to do everything for most of my life, and whether I've succeeded at anything is a different matter.
There was a group of people who mostly sort of did things together. We'd go to dances. There's a jazz club. There was
The folk club was there.
yeah, and I would always ask Nuala if she's going. I never said, "Will you go out with me?" Nuala started applying to university art courses, and I was applying just to art schools. And so I put on my list I would try to go to Leeds, where Nuala was
Deciding
about, and I actually followed her to Leeds. There's no other way to put it. We got married at the end of the second year.
Yeah.
We were really, really young. I was 20. There was a big fight with Nuala's father, at the end of which he was so exasperated. "You whippersnapper, you're still wet behind the ears." My degree, such as it is, was in sculpture. It was already a flexible thing. If you're doing art, you might be doing three-dimensional things. So I was making flat sculptures, and Nuala was making bumpy paintings.
In our final shows, we each exhibited the same piece of work. They were at different
Of course,
times.
my final was a year before Nuala's.
But we were working from home.
No, we found in a junk shop some silk screens which still had the political screens on them, so that there was of a man, just a portrait like this, and we thought we'll print it in so many ways, double print it and cut things out and make collages with them, and so Nuala did the printing because she had the access in her.
I'm waiting to hear the story.
And, we each not claimed it, felt that
it was our work.
It was our work, so we both exhibited it in our degree shows. There was a cross-reference because John Jones, who was Nuala's tutor, was the guy who'd been to America and spoken to all the pop artists and so on. I got to hear him, but he found somebody in one of his other courses that he was running, a trainee teacher called Patrick Hughes, and he brought with him surrealism, Dada, Duchamp, and all the ideas which Nuala's tutor, John Jones, knew a lot more about. And I'd spent all my final years as an art student worrying about Duchamp, trying to make work like Duchamp, conceptual work, if you like, is what we were saying. And it was a bit out on a limb. There weren't many people in the same frame of mind. We moved to London.
Mm. My sister was a student at Camberwell at the time, so she knew of a student house that's going to be free in the summer, so we moved in there. I was working at the hospital because Les was working for Pickford's.
Eventually they asked me to join, but just at the moment I decided that I was going to try and be a teacher. I did a teacher training course. Nuala was teaching art history at Camberwell and St Albans, was it?
Yeah, or any place I could get, and doing adult education.
But by that time we decided, well, we can't go on saying we want to be artists without doing any art. So we saved roughly one of our salaries, thinking we'd have 6 months off, and
we've been living on that ever since. Really, is our stock reply, and we have more or less been.
We never again had a proper
because of the huge gap in pay for teachers. Then I could earn in 2 days what Les could in a week, so then I could still do the 2 days.
Over a summer we did 10 paintings, sharing ideas before we started painting, and we built into it that if ever we disagree, we do both versions, which we did once in those 10 pictures. And one of the pictures we wanted to make required a running person, and we didn't quite know what a running person looked like freehand because we'd never had that, and it didn't come up in life classes. So we took some photos and transposed them and just drew from the photo. Then we came up against our different handwriting, painterly handwriting. and we started looking for ways around the painterly handwriting not being a dissociation on the surface. And we did things like paint things in acrylic and then covering it with resin and sanding it down the surface so as to make it matte and get rid of some of the different kinds of brush strokes on it. Where it led to was that we were going to try, instead of brush painting, we'd spray pictures on, and we'd spray it with 5 colours and mix the colours on the surface. So it came out looking like a grainy photo. Now, that's kind of what the aim was, wasn't it? And then we worked out that we could make stencils. Now, if you're painting a face, you could make stencils for the dark areas, the light areas,
the red, the blue,
the reds, the blues, and so on. And then and initially it was with, we did some with ink, with an airbrush, and that faded within about 5 years. I mean, there's several paintings around which seemed to have black and white figures on, because with bigger areas you would spray with spray guns.
We had to learn because there weren't really people doing it like that, I don't think, were there?
It was very complicated. We did 17 pictures one year, and 7 the next year, and 4 the next year. We had small children during the spraying years, so and we tried mornings and afternoons, one day on, one day off, 1 week on, 1 week off,
inefficient,
up to a month each, and we were very inefficient. It was very difficult to separate yourself from the one who's looking after the kids. But anyway, we were inefficient, but we got by, if you like. We had to abandon the spray because it was...
We had about 100 pictures we thought we wanted to do.
It was a pretty seductive technique. And had lots of good things going for it, but on the other hand, we were getting way behind our thoughts. You know, we had far more thoughts than we had time, and it also became very inhibiting because if you were going to spend 3 months on the next painting,
which one
you'd be inhibited about whether we can start this. Is this one good enough? And you'd start pre-empting, and we had to find another way. Well, we had to come out of it, start using brushes again. But the one thing that happened during the spray years is we'd left the preciousness of our own technique, and we could say, let's paint like this, and it'd be up for discussion.
So we'd found a common language.
Yeah.
We first showed on Hampstead railings, I think, didn't we?
We did. We sold a few paintings there of very, very simple sprayed paintings, you know, with downs going like that.
And then the frame was sprayed too with a different...
Yeah. And we'd been going to the zoo and we did a few paintings with animals in them. I remember having a rhinoceros in the Royal Academy, and this painting, which is called A Strong Room, we saw an ad in an art mag saying, do you think your work qualifies for narrative painting? From a guy called Charles Spencer. We wrote to him, said we think we are, and he
ventured to South London and discovered us.
And discovered us in Camberwell. Yeah. Since our work was sprayed and related to photography, we were often mixed up with photorealism, which, just for the record, we see as being essentially an abstract exercise where people try to reproduce the qualities of a photograph without too much care about what the image is. And ours, we thought, was narrative. That the whole thing was the narrative. You want to engage the viewer with what's going on and what's just happened, what's going to happen next, and so on. So this painting was in the Camden Arts Centre. Yeah. So Patrick Hughes, aforementioned, my tutor at Leeds, was having Angela Flower's first exhibition, and Nuala went in first and we said, do you look at artists' work? Luckily, we could say, well, we've got a painting in an exhibition in Camden Arts Centre, which I think if we hadn't done it, but we had said that Patrick had taught me, so it was sort of part of it. So that was the introduction, and then...
So I've got a gap.
I've got a gap between exhibitions for a week, and we put this little group of pictures which are called The Adventures of a Sleeping Man, which is the same figure painted in different settings, and she sold them. That was the beginning of our connection with the artwork. After the Sleeping Men exhibition,
she decided
she said, let's have a show.
Yeah, and she said, we're going to call you Boyd and Evans. None of this Fionnuala and Les, none of that Fionnuala, Boyd and Evans. Boyd and Evans, that's it. She tried to insure us against splitting up. And got quite sorry somewhere, but nobody thought we'd last for more than 2 minutes, I think. What we haven't talked about at all is that, I told you that women can't be artists and women, given whatever you think of that, lots of people do think that. Certainly we won a prize early on in London. And I'm ashamed to say, because I was pregnant then, that I didn't go. Les went to collect it.
We just used letters, LDF, Evans, because we didn't want to not give it to us because we were a couple.
But we didn't, and I knew that all I'd be talked to about was pregnancy and whatever else. And that bit was hard to do. And everyone, the general line is, isn't it nice I share his hobby? Or I've got a hobby that fits in. And it's been infuriating. And then the other thing is that people want to know who's the best.
In those days, every quality paper would write reviews of commercial galleries all over London. And we got lots of approval in the early days.
Got lots of good press. We'd have had a career if we'd noticed what was happening.
The British Council sent our work to a show in Cagnes-sur-Mer, and the news came back that we'd won the Gold Parrot.
And we thought, what is this?
And
10,000 francs, which was...
What can you mean? Gold. Turned out it was a gold palette. Then they had a thing about collaboration.
People helping you, that's the big cheat, you see.
And but there was somebody on the staff who was erudite enough to find precedent in a pair of brothers in the French Academy who'd exhibited code work, so it was allowed, so that was good.
The British Council stood up for us, I must say. They were great.
Yeah. Fantastic. And we had a lot of support from the British Council over the years.
Yeah. We actually applied for this scholarship one year. It was new, it was just to celebrate the bicentenary, and didn't get it and thought no more about it. And the next year we got this frantic phone call saying, we haven't had your entry yet, we haven't had your entry yet. So we quickly put an entry in and we got it. And it was really for promising artists of the future. We asked them if we could travel with it. And it was a wonderful grown-up scholarship. It was really good. They said, that's what you want to do. And we did. And we lived in a camper home with our 2 children for a year.
This in a way is where the photography sort of started having a bigger place. We recognised that we wouldn't be able to work with, as we're travelling and with the kids and so on. So we bought new cameras for that trip. Light is an extraordinary thing in America. It's very different from British light. We took pictures at night in Los Angeles. They are as though surrealised by the smog reflecting from the sky.
And the desert is just, being in it is just extraordinary.
We were on at the Grand Canyon in midwinter, nobody else there, and that was just amazing, magical.
Quiet and
silence and
animals. I can remember us all at one point having a bit where I can't take any more in. I really can't take any more in. I just stopped, and I can remember where I was, but I can remember it happening to Ruby at the bottom of Death Valley. You can just see, below sea level, you can see acres of sort of salt flats. And I can remember she just burst into tears. And I felt like that up at the Canyon de Shade, but somewhere else. It's overwhelming, this landscape.
We tried to compose them in the lens, if you like, which you don't need to do when you're making a painting, because you can always add another bit over here. Oh. Eventually we had an exhibition of photographs.
In Washington?
In Washington and then in London later on. There were slightly snide reviews, but it was well reviewed, and we sold loads and loads of pictures and barely broke even.
Was that so expensive to do?
Yeah. The Observer did a sort of 10-page coverage of our photos.
It was fantastic. They'd never done photographs so well.
And Stern saw them and invited us to come and photograph Germany, which basically meant they wanted us to go to a nudist colony and take pictures
And
of nudes
the red
and the
light
Reaper
districts
barn,
are-
and they didn't get us, and we didn't get them.
European light is really hard. It's subtler.
We couldn't find it. America just keeps saying, "Look at me."
Yeah.
We were really short of money, and the Arts Council said, "Do you want to do an artwork in Milton Keynes in the Wolverton Centre?" So we, having no money, there was money attached to this commission.
£3,000, wasn't it?
I don't remember
Big wall.
what it was.
They said, "Do you want a big wall and some money?"
So we said yes, and came to visit Milton Keynes a number of occasions, taking pictures all around, and eventually came up with the picture that was there and is now in the library. So we did that, and whilst we were doing it, we spoke to Cindy Hargate, who was the arts officer at the time. At that time, Milton Keynes arts officer had a budget. Imagine. And she, we said, "Well, we've enjoyed coming here. Is there any way we could spend more time here?" And so I was thinking of setting up a residency.
So that's how we applied.
And that was it. That was it's no application really. She just set it up. Liz Lay had left, so they had the farmhouse at Stacey Hill farm, which is where we lived, and the kitchens would be a studio. And now, what we agreed to do with Cindy was that we would come and make a major public work. Mm. And between the time that was agreed and the time we arrived, arts officer had changed.
Sean Hennessy, he was given the job of looking after us really and finding something. So he found us a job with VW. We went to do their Christmas garden, and they saw what we could do, and they said, "Oh, we'll do more than that." And they, unlike anybody in our lives, they paid us when we'd done it. The next day. So just being
And we did a number of paintings based on Milton Keynes.
Had a show.
So during the first year, we were taking a lot of photographs around town, and with a view to something. And the second year we painted it.
It took quite a time painting it.
We painted it in 2-metre square panels, of which we only get 2 of them together in the studio. We didn't want to come here for more than a year initially. We couldn't possibly spend it.
We decided we were going to stick it out till the children finished at school, and then we'd probably leave then and go to Boston. But in fact, it was rather wonderful when they did leave. We found we wanted to stay.
We really enjoyed it when we first here. There was no there. It wasn't here, and you were going round corners and.
A new bit was there.
A new bit there.
Well, you must
was
remember
there,
that.
or you go around the corner. There'd be no road the other side of the corner. And it was all quite exciting. I wonder what's going to be there. What's going to be? And we met lots of people who were very excited about what was going to be there. Now it's become slightly invisible. Again, no, because we're so familiar with it all. And I think we're going to try and re-engage in the near future. There's a gap between 84 and 91. What were you doing then?
I tell you what we did do. We did a few commissions, didn't we? Then.
Oh yes, we did. We did a group portrait of the court of Bank of England, which was palaver, but didn't go smoothly, but it did go well.
Yeah.
And then we did a group portrait of the Royal College of Surgeons,
which was agony.
Which was agony too.
Commissions, you always say yes because you're desperate for money. And they always have, although they always say we chose you and we want you to do it, they then don't tell you what they really want out of it, and you don't know. And so in case the Bank of England, they'd chosen us via the National Portrait Gallery and all sorts of other things, knew what we could do, but basically we couldn't be there while they were discussing money. And we were really cross because they said, actually, you've got to do it now and you've only got 3 minutes. And Minolta has lent us all these automatic cameras and we got something. You know, they were milling
We were very
around.
cross to have got back and had enough to work from.
And then we did this painting and it went really well. You know, the paint went on well. We're talking about wet oil paint and it all went right, which is very rarely the case. And we presented it and there was this huge silence. And that's when you're really glad you've got a gallery between you. So eventually they rang up and said, you know, what did you think of it? And they said, oh, we thought it was fantastic. It was really great and we love it. But
2 people shouldn't have been there and 3 other people should have been there.
But you know, and they said, you only got these 3 minutes, and they knew what we did, and they said, well, why didn't you? Well, we didn't think we'd recognise the people, and I thought, but that's why you chose us. The surgeons one came through
Yes,
a surgeon who's
surgeon we knew.
at part of the College of Surgeons, and had seen this portrait we painted there. Anyway, that had its own problems, but it's...
Mainly because we designed something that would be 18 feet long, and it was a kind of 360-degree flattened out picture, so we're in the middle of an oval table going around like that. And the president didn't want to be the guy who commissioned the largest picture ever, so he insisted we shrink it.
And it was agony.
And so you're making what would have been a 12-foot long miniature.
Everybody in it is worried about their rank and how near the president they are. He's worried about who they're looking at, if they're all looking at him enough.
As you're going round taking pictures, you see people taking their glasses.
It's a Mexican wave of glasses going down. And they were all, but you know what they say about surgeons and God, don't you? Yes. But it's absolutely like that. They would all come up to us separately and say, never mind about anybody else, as long as I'm all right. It was extraordinary.
One of the surgeons insisted on coming to visit us. He said to inspect the painting. You've no right to inspect the painting. We allowed him to come. Apparently he's going to take up painting.
He's going to be a portrait painter when he retires in March. This was February.
So we're going to, when we retire, we're going to become surgeons. In '91, Matthew Flower's then wife has a sister who was married to
Nigel Windsor, who's running
the
Royal Geographical Society.
And Matthew persuaded him that we would be good people to send in their coming expedition to Brunei.
They wanted us to be able to give an impression of what it was like to be there, because everyone was trying to save the rainforest. Everybody was fed up with yet another photograph of things, and they wanted something.
People come
another
up
way of tackling
with very technical information, and they wanted us to give some idea about what it's like to be there.
And he said, "Don't worry about the money. We'll fund it all." And that didn't work out at all. He didn't, as it happened. But anyway, by then we were committed to going. And for artists to see something you'd never seen before, it's a wonderful chance.
I mean,
we really didn't know what we were going to see.
It wasn't what we expected our artwork to do. You know, we weren't aiming to go to jump, but it was an opportunity which you felt you couldn't put.
And it was, you know, it was extraordinary. You'd never get that chance, very rarely get that chance in your life to go somewhere where you don't know what to expect.
At the time that came up, we were thinking of that we weren't happy with the way we were painting with acrylic paint. So we decided we were going to start using oil paint. So in the rainforest, our plan was we would take cameras. We spent a month identifying places we want to go back to paint, and whilst taking pictures as well. And the second month we carried our stuff up the hills
and our water and our food
and sat, and then when the cacks started coming out.
Provided wonderful answers for me anyway to all those people who say you're cheating by using photographs. I mean, I never thought I was, but it doesn't half get to you in the end. And because actually we needed both to get the information out of there. There's that shaft of light that comes through that dense canopy, suddenly makes a picture, and can only do that with a camera.
You won't catch on a painting.
But on the other hand, if you're sitting there painting, you don't half see a lot. You can see into the black, and actually you're quiet. And you see animals again, and you realise they're looking at, that landscape is looking at you. We weren't making botanical illustrations, but you soon have an allegiance to it. You want to paint it how it is, because you could sort of painted any old leaf.
There's no storytelling, no serious,
Yeah.
no
Except of that place.
And
Yes.
I think we were kind of lending them our ability to paint, I suppose. We were teaching ourselves to paint again, because interestingly, rainforest leaves are big.
Or tiny.
They're tiny in England.
Yeah.
That's where you get tiny leaves, but they're mostly big, and you can make a brushstroke, which in the right context means a leaf. And it lends itself to painting in a much looser way than we had done before.
So we were painting from our sketches and our photographs, but painting in a studio then when we were doing big ones. We've always enjoyed the exhibitions of those, people going up to them and then coming back, and up to them and coming back. Is it paint or is it a leaf? And it produces a swaying movement this way.
We've been in shows with people actually being quite emotional about them. What we got out of that was changing the way we were painting. Flowers Gallery were opening gallery in Los Angeles.
That's right.
In 1998, and we decided that we would go to the opening and build in a couple of weeks to go back to American Desert to see if it still held its attraction. So we did.
Yeah.
And we did, and we came home. We got out of that trip. We got 8 paintings, which we sold really. That encouraged us to ask Flowers again, Matthew Flowers again. This is another good thing he did. Is there any way he could find finance for us to spend 3 months in America? And it's a long story, but I'll try and keep it short. We did a painting of me, Nuala's father, and my son Jack, called Islands and Men. She exhibited at Flowers and said, would you please not sell it? We want to keep it for the family. What did they do? Can we just take it to a fair in America? And it's sold. Matthew spoke to the guy who bought it, even though he hadn't wanted to sell it, and he was a very brilliant, wealthy man, John.
Lovely.
And he put up money for us to go.
He was the most extraordinary man.
He was in love with American landscape too, which he wanted to share. We arrived in America at the beginning of our three months we were going to spend, and went to meet
This wonderful man.
And during the conversation, he said, "Well, I'm chair of this organisation.
I don't know if you're interested.
I don't know if you're interested in the Nature Conservancy," and he introduced us to a lot of these places, which are
And got us permission to go in.
they're not the highest mountain, they're not the deepest river, but they're all scientifically, environmentally interesting places. This time we were using medium format cameras and lugging around with us. We did a lot of paintings from the first trip, and then there was, during this century, roughly every 5 years, 3, 4, 5 years, we've done more 3-month trips. After the first set of paintings and a few more, we were aiming to get photographs.
We didn't consciously think we're not going to paint anymore. It's just that this was one way of showing some of these.
Yeah, with the big format cameras, we see what looked like pretty brilliant things going on, and you take the picture, you come home, and you've got another picture of American desert, and somehow there wasn't the thing it wasn't shining out of the picture somehow.
We wondered why we taken it.
Yeah, and we were asked to do paint on black and white photographs, and we did a series with the same scene, and we did painted different vehicles within the same scene. And then it occurred to us that we would do that with Photoshop with some of our pictures. The first one was a dead motel, you know, just still bright blue but erect. You just took the colour out of the background.
So we always took the colour out, and because we realised we'd been looking at the blue, but in the picture was all the rest, and it's very distracting.
And we thought it brought you back to the thing you'd taken. And so we tried them with lots of other pictures, doing these colour and black and white pictures, which actually led to a kind of a shift in our production, because we sold them and we had shows with them and they sold quite a lot, let's say. We did one which was, we called it Anecdotes, where we'd taken lots of different things that we'd seen and put them all in one picture, 12 metres long.
And made the horizon join up.
And made the horizon join up with Photoshop. But that was the only one. I mean, mostly they are just straight arrangements, just straight photographs. Somewhere in the process, about 2006 I think it was, that we went all digital. It was 2017 we were asked and agreed to do something for the hospital, and we thought that would be, we'd base it on trees because we live in a city of trees, and which is of interest to us. I mean, one of the great things about Milton Keynes was the idea of a city of trees.
And whether you limit what you do in a hospital to, you know, things that need to sort of include everybody, it's everybody's experience is doable there. Not everybody's experience, I mean it can be something that everybody knows about. Yeah.
So we've spent some time taking pictures around Milton Keynes, but concentrating on the landscape rather than the houses and the people. And that's still running. Having done that work, we are currently working with some developers who are producing flats in central Milton Keynes, and the theme that we offered them was trees. Being an artist, it's every day when you wake up you're in charge of what's important to you. You've chosen it because it's important to you. You don't have to go and ask somebody else. It's just there. You're ready to do.
I'd also say it's completely unachievable. Your perfect picture you're never going to do, but you always want to try, and something leads to something else.
Because you were doing what you were doing last year, you're now in a position to do what you're doing now. There's no ambition in it. It's just you're naturally moving to the next thing, and we don't know what it will be. We're
still doing it. We're still aiming at it, and I imagine we'll be doing that until we lose our marbles.
We're looking again at the inspiration of our earlier work. And not to reproduce them, but to think, how would this way of thinking apply again? There was a moment after we started going to America when we'd come up with a picture which was simply a picture of a scene, and we're looking at each other and saying, where's the story? You know, and can we do this? And we did, and we got into a habit of doing that. At that point, kind of lost the story. We want to bring the story back. We're quite looking forward to.
Back to basics, if you like, for us. I mean, in a way of thinking. So, we don't know what they're going to be yet, but we've started.